How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holcman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holcman.
Welcome to this edition of Real Talk. Thanks for joining me. In my career, this is probably the most serious of the podcasts I've ever done. Very, very serious topic here, and it has to do with intellectual property theft. Intellectual property theft. China and India are widely cited as the biggest intellectual property thieves, particularly concerning United States companies. The United States has also placed China, Russia, and other countries on its annual blacklist for IP theft. While China is historically the record of concern to a lot of people, the situation is evolving. Other countries like Indonesia, Russia, and some South American nations are also on the U.S. watch list for intellectual property protection concerns. A little bit of a look here. China, frequently identified as a major source of IP theft, including pirated software. The United States has levied tariffs on Chinese goods in response to IP theft, and forced technology transfer is what they usually do. Sorry for the giggling here. It's that nervous laugh here, unfortunately. India is also a major concern for IP theft, especially in areas like software. The U.S. has included India on the watch list for IP protection. Indonesia, Russia, and some South American nations are also on the U.S. watch list. Watch list for IP protection concerns. Mexico and other countries are also mentioned as having issues with IP theft. What are the concerns here? What's contributing to this? Economic incentives. Some countries have prioritized economic growth over IP protection, leading to a lack of enforcement and an environment where IP theft is tolerated. Corruption makes it easier for IP thieves to operate and undermine IP protection efforts. Technological advancements. The rise of digital technologies and online piracy has made it easier to steal and distribute intellectual property. But what's the biggest factor? Weak legal infrastructure. Countries with weak IP laws and enforcement mechanisms are vulnerable to IP theft. Welcome to the United States of America. What is the additional threat not discussed in the general press that I just gave you? Domestic intellectual property theft. United States domestic international property theft. We are putting a new name on there. We call it intellectual property terrorism. These people are terrorists. Intellectual property terrorism is not widely recognized or formally defined in legal terms, I don't believe, or academic context. It is the deliberate and malicious use of intellectual property, that's theft or infringement, to harm a nation, an organization, individuals, or companies. It may involve stealing trade secrets, counterfeiting products, or infringing on patents and copyrights with the intent of undermining economic stability, national security, and competitive advantage. This suggests that such actions can be as damaging as traditional forms of terrorism. They can disrupt economies, harm public trust, and, of course, harm the institutions themselves. Once again, it's the use of intellectual property that is stolen or infringing, and it harms and undermines the national economy, security, competitors, individuals, and, of course, most importantly, the organizations and companies that are actually developing the intellectual property. Yes, trade secrets, patents, copyrighted material to benefit foreign entities, competitors, or terrorist organizations threatening public safety, competitiveness, and economic stability. Now, let's look across the pond for a moment. Here is the United Kingdom definition of terrorism. I didn't say intellectual property terrorism, but United Kingdom definition of terrorism. It's an act or threat designed to influence the government or intimidate the public. The purpose to advance a political, religious, or ideological cause. The current UK definition of terrorism is given in the Terrorism Act of 2006. In the UK, terrorism as a violent action that is one of the following: endangers a person's life other than that of the person committing the action, involves serious violence against a person, causes serious damage or to property, creates a serious risk to the public's health and safety, and interferes with or seriously disrupts an electronic system. And by the way, it goes by other names: breaches, cyber attacks, cyber hacks, infiltrations, intrusions, malware, computer assaults, cyber intrusions, cyber warfare, digital attacks, economic invasions, denial of service attacks. Please realize that it is larger than just China. That's where we're finger pointing today. Now, it is time. It is time to point the finger at artificial intelligence vendors as the greatest intellectual property terrorism threat in the United States. I'm sorry to be this blunt. We are subject to this as a small organization, and a lot of organizations are. Intellectual property terrorism occurring on our soil. Just like we call mistakes generated by large language models and artificial intelligence hallucinations, we call them, by the way, fabrications. Words have meanings and impact. I am not against innovation or creativity. I am against thievery. What we need to recognize is there are 4 categories of data that is used or available to, in quotes, train, close quotes, artificial intelligence engines. For those of you interested, I have another podcast titled AI Engines, What are the Categories of Data Used for Training? It goes into an elaboration of this particular item. In summary, those 4 categories are open data on the internet and other sources. Number 2, this is the one that I'm concerned about right now, and I want other people to be concerned that have much more influence and power than I have in the industries. Copyrighted data, trademarked data. This is theft. But just for those that have heard me before, what are number 3 and number 4? Data requiring some initial exchange of information and funds. By the way, the AI engines don't get access to that. And number 4, true best practices. So please recognize, I'm trying to point out flaws in today's training and the impact it has, but also get you to recognize what you're getting, even with these caveats, aren't best practices, because there's no exchange of information and these AI engines can't get to it. So that podcast will provide some insight into understanding of these categories. My apologies for sounding this harsh. I'm trying to wake up those organizations out there that do have the power and the influence to change the pathway we were on, which is a pathway of United States intellectual property loss. It's going to continue until somebody wakes up and says, enough is enough. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holcman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.